Caution. Caution is out again. Who is it this time?
What did we just watch? Let's talk about it. Hey everyone, it's Taylor Kitchen and welcome back to Above the Line on the ATYL Media channel. And this weekend, NASCAR was in the heartland at Iowa Speedway. We gotta dive into the Xfinity Series. For just a quick second, congratulations to Sam Mayer on winning that race. The first race win for Haas Factory Team, so a huge one for them. Not only that, but it was the first win for Ford in the Xfinity Series all season. That's crazy. What a crazy stat. Nonetheless, to Sam Mayer, who was already pretty solidly locked into the playoffs on points alone in the Xfinity Series, just farthered that security for himself. But congrats to him, that entire team. A major win there. But let's now jump to the Cup Series race because, my goodness, I have so much to say. The first stage of the NASCAR Cup Series race was all green flag racing, no cautions. It was beautiful, it was fun, but there was really no passing. It was literally like an over 40 lap battle between Brad Keselowski and William Byron for the lead towards the end of the stage. That was like the most exciting thing ever. And even then, they could not pass each other. It took a mistake from Byron getting loose over Brad Keselowski for Brad to get the lead. So that was pretty crazy too. But Brad Keselowski picking up his first playoff point of the year. Very exciting there. Same thing for stage two. Brad Keselowski picked up a second playoff point, winning stage two. But my goodness, stage one and stage two, and even two, the final stage, couldn't be any more different from one another. The second half of this race was a caution-filled affair. It was atrocious. I think 12 cautions on the day total. It was just bizarre. It was wild. But all of these restarts and these yellow flags really shook out what the final outcome was going to be for this race, because these teams had the chance multiple times to gamble with pit strategy and fail with that gamble. But at the end of the day, when the final 20 laps started to tick down, we had our eyes on three different drivers. Would William Byron suffer yet another heartbreak of a fuel mileage catastrophe like we saw at Indianapolis Motor Speedway and even earlier at Michigan? Would he be able to hang on to win the race? Would Chase Briscoe be able to win from the pole, capturing his sixth pole position of the season? Would he be able to get it done at Iowa? And then, of course, all eyes were on Brad Keselowski, who led an incredible amount of laps this race, the strongest we'd seen that 16 after just a drought during the start of the year. We were nervous where that 16 was going to be. Now they're picking up steam, and it was time to see if they could capitalize on it. At the end of the day, though, that 24 team finally got rid of the bad luck and won the Iowa Corn 350. What's crazy to me is William Byron only has 2 wins this season. The last time, of course, winning this season was at the very start of the season for the Daytona 500. What's even crazier to me, though, is when you do the math on this team's fuel strategy for this race, because they last pitted on lap 206. The fuel stretch is around 110 laps. And somehow, some way, they made it. They made it to the end with even fuel to spare for a burnout. And that just seems to be the case for the Gen 7 cars. When you think they've run out, they haven't. Of course, though, we know for William Byron, it's bit him in the past. But for this team, it has to be a huge chip on their shoulder going into the next 3 races before the playoffs begin. A huge chip on their shoulder for when the playoffs begin to show that they are still true contenders. But obviously, this also helps William Byron retain that regular season championship points lead, which we will talk about in just a little bit. But of course, William Byron, your winner of the Iowa Corn 350. Let's move into the rest of your results. In the second position, Chase Briscoe, and Chase really didn't have the best of luck during today's race, or I guess people around him didn't have the best of luck, because there were 2 instances where Chase Briscoe just kind of got loose under another car and just took them out. Namely, though, with Christopher Bell and Tyler Reddick, that incident there took 2 of his Toyota teammates out of good finishes. They both finished outside the top 15, so not great for them. Chase Briscoe, after the race, said, "I'm sorry. Boneheaded move on my end. We'll move on to next week." But Chase Briscoe finishing in that second position. Third, Brad Keselowski. And this one I am genuinely gutted about. Genuinely gutted for this team. Brad Keselowski and Jeremy Bolin seemed to have a perfect strategy brewing for this race. And it was the strongest I had seen that 6 team basically, I think, since their win last year at Darlington. I know they had been building on really good finishes the past few weeks, and I kind of thought the momentum would build to a head here at Iowa, knowing the speed in that number 6 Ford. And unfortunately, it just did not pan out. Brad Keselowski led 68 laps. And when it came down to it, Brad Keselowski after the race really just said it was how the cautions fell. It just didn't fall in our favor. And to think what this win would have done for Brad. He was over 100 points out of that playoff picture, below that cutoff line. And if he got a win, all that's a race. He would have won his way into the playoffs. However, it would have been emotional whiplash here because two of Brad Keselowski's cars that he owns of Ryan Preece and Chris Buescher are fighting for that last playoff spot around that playoff bubble. So to think, if Brad Keselowski won this race, he would have knocked both of them out of the playoff picture, putting them both in must-win situations. So either way, the situation's tricky for RFK over there. So thinking of that team as we get to the final 3 races before the playoffs begin, but what could have been for Brad? We'll see if he can capitalize on it. He has some good tracks coming up for him on the schedule. Moving on to the 4th position of Ryan Blaney. If this race was 20 laps longer, Ryan Blaney likely would have won this one. He had more fuel in the tank as opposed to the 3 ahead of him, and he had fresher tires. He was making significant gains through the field and actually tried to pass Brad for that 3rd position as the laps were winding down, but these cars were just so loose. We see this with the Gen 7 car when another car gets under another one trying to make a pass. Just gets loose. The car gets loose, and you just can't make anything happen. So there's some frustration there, of course, but a really good drive, all things considered, for Ryan Blaney during today's race. In 5th place, Ryan Preece. Speaking of good drives, what a comeback for Ryan Preece today. Got a speeding penalty earlier in the race, was trapped a lap down. They thought it had a loose tire. Lots of adversity there, but they fought back to finish inside the top 5. Speaking of adversity during the race, Bubba Wallace. Now, going into this race, he had a really relaxed, calm attitude. He just said, I don't give a damn, literally for the next 4 races. I can try whatever I want, do whatever I want, push the car, push myself as a driver so I can take whatever I learned into the playoffs. So he came into this race a bit calmer. And he had some bad luck. They had to change, I believe, the right front toe link on the car, got the lucky dog position at twice, and rallied for a 6th place finish. So I think a calm demeanor or a calm mindset is the key for Bubba Wallace moving forward to be a real threat in the playoffs. And even to, I guess, a threat for the next 3 races on the schedule before the playoffs hit. But in 7th position, we have Alex Bowman. In 8th, Carson Hocevar. And Carson Hocevar was really not anyone's friend today during the race. Of course, he spun right at the end of stage 2. I do appreciate NASCAR just getting to the end of the stage there. I think that was ultimately the right call. But on lap 230 is where things went a bit more wrong for at least Carson Hocevar's competitor, but not for Carson per se. On lap 230, the caution came out for an incident between Carson Hocevar and Zane Smith. It looked like Carson Hocevar just got loose under the 38, and of course, Zane Smith in the 38 was on the wrong end of that deal. It looked like after that, though, Zane Smith tried to retaliate a little bit, taking a swipe at the 77 of Carson Hocevar, and luckily for both of them, it didn't pan out, because if Zane Smith wants to race next week, can't be doing that stuff. So anyways, of course, clear frustration, and then it looked like after the race, Zane Smith's crew chief actually approached Carson Hocevar and had a few words to say to him regarding all of this. Don't know what was said, to be quite honest with you all, but we get the picture here. Not clearly happy with Carson Hocevar, the move, and or just the accident that occurred there. Zane Smith's been costed some pretty decent finishes the past few weeks, just being in the wrong place at the wrong time. So you hate to see it for them, but Carson Hocevar, I mean, finished in the top 10, so I guess good for Carson. Moving on, though, to the 9th place finisher of Joey Logano, and then, of course, 10th, we have Austin Dillon. Actually pretty good to see him running decently this race, kind of finished where he ran the entirety of the event, and also a good sign to see, too, for ECR engines. We saw AJ Allmendinger running decently well the first half of the event as well. So all things considered, that is your top 10. A few more finishing positions I wanted to note, though. We had Austin Cindric in 12th, and of course, Josh Berry in 13th, and both of those drivers were running pretty well. I think just how the cautions failed didn't benefit them either. You could say the same thing for Chase Elliott, who finished in 14th, and boy oh boy, Chase Elliott had quite a race. Chase was so aggressive. I guess both Chases in this race were Chase Briscoe and Chase Elliott, but Chase Elliott was so aggressive this race, particularly against his teammate Kyle Larson, who tangled on track twice. They didn't look like they were teammates in these instances, and I am curious to see what the meeting's going to be like with the team this coming week between those two, if things are talked about at all. But Chase Elliott was going for position because I think he had a better car than ultimately where he ended up, all things considered. But man, Kyle Larson was a punching bag today. Very clearly frustrated over the radio. Finished outside the top 20. Not a good day for that 5 team of Kyle Larson, but they've got a few wins in the bank this season. They can just move on. But wow, what interesting racing there between those two teammates. Let's move on to look at the point situation, because it's a little dicey between the two teammates of Chris Buescher and Ryan Preece, with 23 points separating them around that cutoff line. And the 3 tracks we have remaining in the regular season, Watkins Glen, Richmond, and Daytona, are pretty good for those two drivers, so it could get very interesting as we head into the playoffs. Of course, for the regular season championship, though, with this win, it helps William Byron out ahead of his teammate Chase Elliott by 18 points. Kyle Larson is 45 points behind William Byron, and then Denny Hamlin is 51 points behind William Byron for that regular season title. So the points are still very close. Right now, the battle really is between Byron and Elliott, so we'll see who can close it out before the playoffs begin. Before we go into our race rating, I just wanted to talk about the NBC broadcast this race, because NBC, or I guess USA, is back. Of course, we had Fox, then we had Prime, then we had TNT, and now we're kind of back into the normal swing of things. And I know there were some gripes online. Yes, some of where the commercials fell during the green flag action and stuff like that was not ideal. I was not a fan of it, but I'm going to give them benefit of the doubt. This was their first race back. I'm going to say it was totally fine, but I will say what I appreciated about this was the balance of the talent in the booth. Lee Diffie, phenomenal, stunning, storytelling, just, I will praise it till the end of time. Lovely Diffie. And then, of course, with Steve Letarte and Jeff Burton, incredible. I thought those three worked together really well, and they had their full focus on the action on track. There was no banter between those three really often at all. They were focused on telling the story of the race. I feel like there was a lot that we kind of missed in terms of points of the race, and we learned it more so after the race and the post-race interviews. But nevertheless, I thought it was a pretty solid start for NBC, all things considered. You could also see the graphics package was very similar to what Prime had for theirs, a little bit more refined, a little simplified there. But overall, not bad for NBC's first race of the year, but I am excited to have them back, and I thought it was really interesting, too, to end the broadcast with some radio sweetheart moments from the race. Different, fun, interesting. We will see how NBC does going forward. I will say I do love NBC's coverage. It's my favorite of the year, but when we had Prime this year, ooh, that topped the charts. It's going to be hard to compare anything else to Prime. It was just so good. So hopefully NBC can kind of live up to that. Again, it's not streaming, so I get it's going to be different, but hopefully NBC continues to improve this season. That said, though, the race rating, let's dive right into it, rating this race above or below the yellow line. I mentioned a lot of times this race, cars getting loose, inability to pass, the amount of cautions that just flew at the end of this race. I have not watched a race in quite some time and have just been frustrated. I watched this race and I started to get mad. Now, a lot of you guys can tell me Taylor touched grass, and absolutely, I need to step outside a little bit as opposed to watching racing, but I was frustrated with this one, and I hate it because the race last year was actually pretty decent. What was crazy about this race is we had 12 cautions in total. It's the most of any race this season according to the NBC or USA broadcast today. And this took up 72 laps of the 350-lap event, which is about 20% of the race. But when you consider that most of those cautions fell in like the last two stages, maybe last stage of the event, it kind of is a gut punch. It's a killer to any momentum this race had until the final 20 laps when you were wondering if these drivers could make it on fuel. That said, though, I was kind of excited to see some tire strategy play into this as well, seeing that these tires maybe were more of a concern to the teams than they originally thought. Of course, the fuel strategy being crazy was fun too. We, at some point in the race, had like 5-ish different strategies, which was fun to kind of keep track of. All things considered, 50% for me on the line. I think the excitement at the end of the race really is what helped me kind of put this race on a 50% as opposed to below it. But wasn't my favorite. Very frustrated. I could be very different in my opinion than what you thought, so let me know in the comments below. But for the Iowa Corn 350, giving it a 50%, just right on that yellow line. So what did you think of the Iowa Speedway weekend, and what was your favorite moment from this race? Let me know in the comments below. And with that, we're done with this episode of Above the Yellow Line. Make sure to go to abovetheyellowline.com to check out our merch, like the bucket hat I'm wearing right now, and of course to find us on social media and to learn more about our content. And of course, as always, we'll be live this Wednesday night at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on the ATYL Media channel. We hope to see you there to talk all things motorsports. Thank you all so much for tuning into this episode of Above the Yellow Line, and until next time, I'll see ya. Bye.